Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, you wore a dress that said, "Tax the rich," to a party where a single ticket cost more than your average constituent makes in an entire year. So, I have a simple question for you tonight. Were you taxing yourself, or were you enjoying being rich? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. It was not a polite softball inquiry from a cable news host. It was a precise, lethal strike. This wasn't a sterile, air-conditioned studio in Washington, D.C., where politicians trade pre-written sound bites. This was right here in the Bronx. This was her district. This was her turf. But tonight, it didn't feel like home court advantage. The room was packed into a community center gymnasium, filled with metal folding chairs under fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry wasps. The air was thick, humid, and smelled of stale coffee and the honest sweat of working people. These were the people she claimed to represent. These were the people she had promised to fight for. But tonight, the atmosphere was different. It wasn't the adoring crowd of college students and activists she was used to. These were working families who had taken unpaid time off from jobs they couldn't afford to miss. There were single mothers who had scrambled to arrange child care they couldn't afford to pay for. There were elderly residents who had walked blocks on swollen ankles, their bodies protesting every step. There were young people who had believed her promises of a revolution, only to find themselves still living in their parents' basements. They came because they were tired. They were tired of struggling while prices skyrocketed. They were tired of promises that evaporated the moment election season ended. And most of all, they were tired of watching their congresswoman go viral on the internet while their bills kept piling up on the kitchen table. They came to hear answers. The stage was stark. Just 2 chairs, 2 microphones, and a massive screen behind them. It was a visual representation of 2 Americas about to collide. On the right sat Ted Cruz. He stood with a calm, unnerving stillness. This wasn't the bombastic politician seen on Twitter. This was the Harvard law graduate, the man who had argued 9 cases before the United States Supreme Court. He possessed a prosecutor's patience, a predator's stillness. He looked at her not with anger, but with the clinical detachment of a surgeon preparing to make an incision. He wasn't here to debate policy nuances. He was here to conduct a cross-examination. On the left sat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was styled to perfection, the TikTok queen, the Instagram revolutionary. She wore a sharp designer blazer, her hair pulled back, her makeup camera-ready. But the confidence that usually radiated from her iPhone screen was faltering under the harsh glare of the gymnasium lights. Something was different here. She couldn't edit this. She couldn't delete the negative comments. She couldn't block the users. This was real life, and Ted Cruz was staring at her with a lawyer's gaze that seemed to peel back the layers of her curated persona. She tried a smile, the one that usually garnered thousands of likes on Instagram. It flickered on her lips, but didn't quite reach her eyes. "Senator Cruz," she began, her voice pitching slightly higher than usual, "I think you are fundamentally misunderstanding the purpose of political art and disruption in elite spaces." Cruz didn't blink. He didn't interrupt. He just let the silence stretch for a painful 3 seconds. "And I am not misunderstanding anything, Congresswoman," Cruz said, his voice low and resonant, carrying to the back of the silent gym. "I am just looking at the facts. And tonight, we are going to talk about who you really are. Not the Instagram version, not the TikTok revolutionary, not the performance activist. Let's talk about the real Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, The one your constituents are starting to see clearly. He paused, letting the weight of the statement settle over the audience. The room went quiet in that particular heavy way that means everyone knows something devastating is about to happen. You campaign as a socialist, Cruz continued, stepping out from behind his chair. You claim to fight for the working class. You talk about eating the rich, taxing billionaires, and destroying capitalism. You have built an entire multi-million-dollar brand on being the voice of struggling Americans, the hero of the poor, the champion of the forgotten. Another pause. Longer this time. He walked to the edge of the stage, looking directly at a row of tired-looking construction workers. But you don't live like a socialist, do you? Cruz asked, turning back to her. You live like a capitalist. You don't sacrifice like you demand others sacrifice. You enjoy luxury while preaching austerity. You are not the voice of the working class, Congresswoman. You are the exploitation of the working class. AOC stiffened, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. And over the next hour, Cruz declared, pointing a finger at the screen behind them, we are going to prove it. We aren't going to use Republican talking points. We are going to use your own photos, your own policies, your own words, your own actions. He looked directly at her, his eyes locking onto hers. 5 rounds, Cruz announced. 5 proofs. 1 conclusion. You are a fraud. The socialist socialite. The champagne socialist. Socialism for them, capitalism for you. Cruz turned to the technician at the side of the stage. Let's begin. The screen behind them flickered to life, illuminating the dim gymnasium with a high-definition image that was jarring in its opulence. It was the photograph. The one everyone had seen, but never like this. Never blown up to 10 feet tall, while the subject sat just a few feet away. It showed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez ascending the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art like royalty. The white designer dress flowed around her, the words, "Tax the Rich," emblazoned across the back in bold, blood-red letters. She was surrounded by a swarm of photographers, her head thrown back in a laugh, basking in the flashbulbs. In the background, celebrities and billionaires looked on, smiling, accepting her as one of their own. She looked beautiful. She looked powerful. She looked undeniably, staggeringly rich. Ted Cruz stepped to the side, letting the image speak for itself. He let it linger for 10 seconds, then 20. He forced the audience, the single mothers, the retirees, the laborers, to stare at it. He forced them to reconcile the woman on the screen with the woman asking for their votes. Let me get this straight, Congresswoman. Cruz broke the silence, his voice deceptively gentle. You attended the Met Gala. You know what the Met Gala is? It isn't a town hall. It isn't a protest. It is where the richest people in America gather to celebrate being rich. He gestured to the screen. Tickets to this event cost $35,000. Tables cost up to $300,000. It is a place where champagne flows like water, where the food on a single plate costs more than your constituents' grocery bills for a month, where celebrities compete to wear the most expensive, most extravagant outfits. It is where luxury isn't whispered, it is screamed. Cruz walked closer to her. You went to that party. You wore that dress. You smiled for those cameras. You mingled with those billionaires. And you want us to believe you were making a statement? You want us to believe you were disrupting elite spaces? AOC leaned forward, activating her viral video voice, earnest, passionate, and rehearsed. Senator, she said, gesturing with her hands, art is about disruption. It is about bringing uncomfortable truths to spaces that need to hear them. I was invited to the Met Gala as a member of Congress, as someone representing working people. And I used that platform to make a bold statement about— About what? Cruz cut in. He didn't shout. He sounded genuinely curious, like a prosecutor leading a witness into a trap. About inequality, AOC insisted, her voice rising. About the wealth gap. About how the rich need to be taxed. That is exactly why I wore it. Exactly, Cruz said, nodding slowly. That is exactly what you said. You talked about inequality while attending a party that costs more than your constituents make in a year. He let that land. You talked about the wealth gap while wearing a borrowed designer dress worth more than their rent. You talked about taxing the rich while your hair and makeup were done by a professional team that costs more than their annual grocery budget. You talked about fighting the power while you posed for photos with the exact billionaires you claim to oppose. Cruz pulled out a remote and clicked it. The image on the screen changed. This wasn't the staged press photo. This was a candid shot from inside the event. It showed AOC laughing uproariously with a group of elites, a crystal champagne glass in her hand. She wasn't protesting. She wasn't disrupting. She wasn't uncomfortable. She looked like she was having the time of her life. Does this look like disruption to you, Congresswoman? Cruz asked, pointing to her smiling face on the screen. Does this look like discomfort? Or does this look like someone enjoying the perks of the elite? AOC's face changed. The mask slipped. That photo wasn't supposed to be part of the narrative. On Instagram, she controlled the angle. Here, Cruz was controlling the evidence. I was making a statement, she repeated, her voice thinner now. You were making content, Cruz corrected her. For your Instagram, for your brand, for your image. But let's talk about what else was happening that night. While you were at that party, clinking glasses. Cruz turned his back on her and faced the audience directly. Picture your life that same night, Cruz said to the crowd. What were you doing while the Congresswoman was at the Met Gala? A woman in the third row wiped her eyes. She knew. They all knew. You were working a double shift, Cruz said, narrating their lives back to them. Both parents working because one income doesn't cut it anymore. Coming home exhausted, body aching, hands raw. You were standing on the subway platform in the sweltering heat because the train broke down again, praying you wouldn't be late for your second job and get fired. His voice softened, becoming intimate. You were sitting at your kitchen table with a calculator and a pile of bills, deciding which ones to pay and which ones to let slide another month. Hoping nothing breaks. Hoping nobody gets sick. Hoping you can make it to next week. You were feeding your kids ramen again, Cruz said, because that is what you can afford. Telling them you aren't hungry so they can eat more. Lying to your children about whether you are okay. He spun back to AOC. That is what your constituents were doing while you were at that party, Congresswoman. While you were drinking champagne they will never afford. While you were wearing a dress worth more than they make in months. While you were posing with billionaires. You were enjoying being rich. The room was silent. It wasn't a comfortable silence. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed down on the chest. Senator, you are mischaracterizing, AOC started. Am I? Cruz snapped. Let me get this straight. Your district has one of the highest poverty rates in New York City. Families are working multiple jobs just to survive. Kids are going to bed hungry. Elderly residents are choosing between medicine and food. And their representative, their supposed champion, spent that night at a party for the ultra-rich, not protesting outside, not disrupting inside, participating, enjoying. A man stood up in the back row. He wasn't a plant. He was real. He was shaking with a rage that had been building for years. "My grandmother can't afford her medication," the man said, his voice trembling. "She skips doses. She rations pills. She prays she doesn't get sicker. And you were at a party that cost more than she makes in a year, wearing 'tax the rich'?" "You want to tax the rich?" the man shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the stage. "You are the rich!" Security started to move toward him, but Cruz waved them off. "Let him speak." "My kids share one pair of shoes," the man continued, tears streaming down his face now. "They take turns. One day him, one day her. They understand. They don't complain. We are trying. Both of us work. We are trying so hard." "And you," the man spat, "you party. You pose for Instagram. You play revolutionary on TikTok. While we drown." He sat down, burying his face in his hands. The woman next to him put a hand on his shoulder. Others nodded. Some cried. Cruz spoke quietly into the microphone. "Congresswoman, were you thinking about them that night?" AOC opened her mouth, then closed it. "Were you thinking about the grandmother who can't afford medication?" "Nothing." "Were you thinking about the kids sharing shoes?" Her hands were moving nervously now, adjusting her blazer, touching her hair. The TikTok confidence was gone. "Or were you thinking about your Instagram followers?" Cruz asked. "Your viral moment? Your brand? Your image?" "You weren't thinking about them," Cruz concluded. "You were thinking about you, and that dress proved it." Tax the rich wasn't ironic. It was honest. You are the rich. You enjoy being rich. You just want everyone else to fund your luxury through taxes while you party. Cruz turned to the camera. "That is round one. The Met Gala. The party. The performance activism. The luxury enjoyed while you suffered." Ted Cruz allowed the emotional weight of the previous round to settle over the gymnasium. The image of the tax the rich dress was still burning on the screen, but he was already reaching into his folder for the next piece of evidence. The audience was quieter now, less restless, settling into a grim attentiveness. They realized this wasn't going to be a standard political debate where both sides score points and go home. This was an unmasking. "That was round one," Cruz said, his voice returning to that steady prosecutorial rhythm. "The Met Gala, the party, the hypocrisy of performance." He walked back to his chair and picked up a stack of stapled papers. They looked official, boring even, the kind of bureaucratic paperwork that usually puts people to sleep. But in Cruz's hands, they looked like a weapon. "But let's be honest," Cruz said, turning the papers over in his hands. "A dress is just a dress. A party is just a night out. You can excuse that as a mistake. You can call it a lapse in judgment." He looked up, his eyes hard. "Round two isn't about a mistake. Round two is about the lifestyle. It is about the money. Your money. Her money. And where the two meet." Cruz walked to the edge of the stage, holding the document up for the front row to see. "These are financial disclosure forms," Cruz explained. "Public record. Anyone can read them. Most people don't bother. But I did." He turned to AOC. "Congresswoman, you campaign as a socialist. You rail against the 1%. You tell these people," he gestured to the crowd, "that the system is rigged against them and that wealth is immoral. But you make good money, don't you?" AOC shifted in her seat, crossing her legs. She knew where this was going, and for the first time, she looked genuinely uncomfortable. "My salary is set by law, Senator. It is public knowledge." "Answer the question," Cruz pressed. "You make $174,000 a year, plus benefits, plus expenses." He turned to the audience. Let that sink in. $174,000. That is more money in 1 year than most of you will make in 5. 5 years of your sweat, your exhaustion, your double shifts equals 1 year of her fighting for you. But it isn't just your salary, is it? Cruz asked, flipping a page. Let's talk about your household. Let's talk about your partner, Riley Roberts. AOC's eyes narrowed. Leave my family out of this. I would love to, Cruz said instantly. But you put him on the payroll. Gasps rippled through the room. This was news to many. According to FEC filings, Cruz read, adjusting his glasses, Riley Roberts was listed as a marketing consultant for your campaign. He received payments from the campaign coffers. Your campaign coffers. Cruz looked at the audience, his voice dropping to a whisper. Your $20 donations. Your $50 donations. The money you scraped together because you believed she was different? Where did it go? It went to her boyfriend. Marketing consultant, Cruz scoffed. For what? Taking photos for Instagram? Traveling with you? Living off the donations of working people? A woman in the front row stood up. She was dressed in a worn cardigan, holding a purse with both hands. She looked like a teacher or a librarian, someone who followed the rules. I donated $50 to your campaign, she said to AOC. Her voice wasn't angry, it was crushed. I teach 3rd grade. That $50 was my supplies budget for the month. I sent it to you because I thought you were fighting the system. She took a breath, her voice shaking. You are telling me my money paid your boyfriend? AOC leaned toward the microphone, her face flushing. Campaign finance laws are complex, and all expenditures were audited and legal. We needed specific expertise that— Expertise? The teacher interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. I needed pencils for my students. And you needed to pay your boyfriend? How is that fighting for me? She sat down, burying her face in a handkerchief. The room murmured in agreement. It was the sound of betrayal. Cruz didn't let up. Now, let's talk about where you live, he said, pacing the stage. You represent the Bronx. You represent Queens. But where do you sleep at night? Navy Yard, Cruz answered himself. Washington, D.C., a luxury apartment complex. Whole Foods downstairs, rooftop pool, concierge. Rent starts at $2,600 a month for a studio, Cruz said. More than most of your constituents make in a month. Just for the roof over your head. While your grandmother in the Bronx, Cruz paused, planting the seed for later, lives in a house with a leaking roof. While your constituents live in walk-ups with broken heaters, you live in luxury. And how do you get around? Cruz clicked the remote. A photo appeared on the screen. It was a selfie AOC had taken, smiling in front of a gleaming white car. A Tesla, Cruz said. Model 3, $60,000. Electric, very green, very expensive. While your constituents, Cruz pointed to a young man in the 3rd row, take the subway that breaks down in the summer heat, the subway that is dangerous at night, the subway that smells like despair. You drive a luxury car worth more than they save in a decade, Cruz said, and then you roll down the window to lecture them about their carbon footprint. The young man stood up. He looked to be in his 20s, tired, wearing a uniform from a fast food chain. I graduated 2 years ago, he said, his voice flat. I have a degree. I work full-time. I live with my parents because I can't afford rent. I take the 7 train every day. It takes an hour each way. I can't afford a car. I can't even afford a used car. He looked at the Tesla on the screen, then at AOC. And you drive that? He asked. And you tell me I have privilege? I don't have privilege, the young man said, his voice breaking. I have debt, and you have a Tesla. Cruz walked to the center of the stage. Let me do the math for you, Congresswoman, he said. You make 5 times what they make. You live in a building they couldn't enter without a security pass. You drive a car they can only dream of, and you pay your boyfriend with their donations. You are the inequality, Cruz declared. You are the elite you pretend to hate. Socialism for thee, Cruz said, pointing to the crowd. Capitalism for me. That is round 2, the lifestyle audit. But money is just money, Cruz said, his face hardening. Round 3? Round 3 is about the future. It is about the jobs you killed to get famous. Get ready, Cruz warned, because this next one is going to hurt. The atmosphere in the gymnasium had shifted from curiosity to a simmering collective anger. The revelations about the salary, the boyfriend, and the Tesla had stripped away the girl from the block mystique. Now, Ted Cruz was preparing to strike at the heart of her political identity. Her record. Round 3, Cruz announced. Let's talk about the headline that made you famous. He clicked the remote. The screen behind them changed. It wasn't a photo this time. It was a news headline from the New York Times, dated February 14, 2019. Amazon cancels plans for New York headquarters. 25,000 jobs lost. Below it, Cruz displayed a tweet from AOC posted that same day. Anything is possible. Today was the day a group of dedicated, everyday New Yorkers and their neighbors defeated Amazon's corporate greed, its worker exploitation, and the power of the richest man in the world. Defeated, Cruz read aloud, savoring the word. That is what she called it. Defeated. She defeated jobs. She defeated opportunity. She defeated the future. Cruz turned to AOC, who was staring fixedly at her notes. Her breathing had quickened. This was the wound that had never fully healed in her district, the scar tissue that everyone in Queens still touched. Congresswoman from Instagram, Cruz said softly, using the nickname like a scalpel. That is what they call you now, because everything is performance. Everything is content. But this had real consequences. Let's talk about what you defeated. 25,000 jobs, Cruz said. Average salary, $150,000. These weren't minimum wage jobs. These were careers. These were tech jobs, management jobs, HR jobs. And the union jobs, Cruz added. Years of construction work, building the tower, laying the pipe, wiring the grid, union wages, union benefits. He walked to the edge of the stage. How many people here have kids? Cruz asked. Hands went up across the room. Almost everyone. How many of you want better for your kids than you had? All the hands stayed up. How many of you saw Amazon coming and thought, finally, a door is opening. Finally, my kid doesn't have to move away to find a good job? The hands stayed up. Heads nodded. Some eyes were wet. She killed it, Cruz said, pointing back at AOC. She shut the door. And you know where those jobs went? Cruz asked. Virginia. Virginia got the headquarters. Virginia got the tax revenue. Virginia families are waking up this morning, driving to those jobs, cashing those checks, building their futures. And you? Cruz looked at the audience. You got a tweet. You got a victory lap on Twitter. A large man in the middle row stood up. He was wearing heavy work boots and a flannel shirt. His hands were calloused, hands that worked for a living. I am a pipe fitter, the man said. His voice was rough, trembling with emotion. Local 1. I would have worked on that project. My son was just finishing his apprenticeship. We talked about it, working the same site, father and son, building something real. He paused, looking at his hands. That was 5 years of work, he said. 5 years of guaranteed income. I was going to pay off my house. I was going to help him with a down payment. He looked up at AOC, his eyes burning. And you celebrated? He asked. You threw a party because you took that away from us? My son is working retail now, the man said. He is stocking shelves. He is a good kid. He works hard. But that career, that future, you stole it. You stole it so you could look cool for your friends in Brooklyn. He sat down heavily. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the sound of dreams dying. Virginia's gain, Cruz said quietly. Your loss. She said she was saving you, Cruz continued. She said she was protecting you from gentrification. She said she was fighting corporate greed. But let's be honest, Cruz said. She wasn't fighting for you. She was fighting for her brand. Because a representative who brings jobs is boring. A revolutionary who fights billionaires is famous. She chose fame, Cruz said. You got poverty. AOC leaned into her microphone. The community did not want Amazon, she insisted, her voice shaking. We refuse to give $3 billion in subsidies to the richest company on earth when our schools are crumbling and our subways are broken. That money belongs to the people. That is a lie, Cruz shouted, his voice finally rising to a roar. The $3 billion wasn't a check, Cruz explained, chopping the air with his hand. It was a tax break on future taxes. If they don't come, there is no money. You spent $0 to save $0. You didn't save money for schools, Cruz said. You lost $27 billion in tax revenue that would have paid for those schools. You lost the money that would have fixed the subway. You are financially illiterate, Cruz declared, and your ignorance cost these people their future. She celebrated, Cruz said, turning back to the audience. Look at the tweet. Anything is possible. Yes, anything is possible. Even destroying your own district. That is round 3, Cruz said. The job killer. But if you think that is bad, Cruz said, lowering his voice, wait until you see what she did to her own family. Round 4 is personal. It is about her grandmother. It is about a photo you all saw, and the money that vanished. Get ready, Cruz warned, because this one reveals the heart of the fraud. The gymnasium was quiet now, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a jury that had seen too much evidence. The anger over the Amazon jobs hadn't dissipated. It had settled into a cold, hard resolve. Ted Cruz stood at the center of the stage, his expression grim. He didn't look triumphant. He looked disgusted. We have talked about the party, Cruz said, his voice echoing off the metal rafters. We have talked about the money. We have talked about the jobs. He walked back to his table and picked up a new folder. This one was thin, but the content was heavy. Round 4, Cruz announced. This one is personal. This one is about family. He clicked the remote. The massive screen behind them changed. It was a photo that had gone viral years ago. It showed a dilapidated ceiling, water stains spreading like a bruise, buckets on the floor catching drips. It was a home in Puerto Rico, still bearing the scars of Hurricane Maria years after the storm. You remember this photo, Congresswoman? Cruz asked. AOC stiffened. Her eyes darted to the screen, then quickly away. This is your grandmother's house, Cruz told the audience. In June 2021, the Congresswoman posted this photo. She told the world her abuela was living in squalor. She blamed the government. She blamed Trump. She blamed America. It broke your heart, didn't it? Cruz asked the crowd. Seeing an elderly woman suffering? It broke my heart, too. So, what happened next? Cruz clicked the remote again. A screenshot of a fundraising page appeared. $104,000 raised. You posted the tragedy, Cruz said to AOC, and Americans responded. They opened their wallets. Liberals, conservatives, it didn't matter. They saw a grandmother in trouble, and they gave. Over $100,000 in a matter of hours. Cruz turned to look at her. Here is the question nobody asks, Cruz said softly. Where did the money go? AOC opened her mouth, but Cruz cut her off with a raised hand. Because we checked, Cruz said. We checked the repairs. We checked the records. Months went by. The roof wasn't fixed. The money didn't go directly to her. It went to community organizations. It went to advocacy. It went into the fog of political activism. But that isn't the worst part, Cruz said. The worst part is what you refused. When that photo went viral, Cruz said, do you know what happened? A local conservative commentator, someone she hates, started a GoFundMe. He raised money specifically to fix the roof. Contractors offered to go down there and do the work for free. They wanted to help Abuela. And what did she do? Cruz pointed at AOC. She said no. Gasps rippled through the room. She refused the money, Cruz said. She refused the help. She told her family to turn it down. Why? Cruz asked. Why would a granddaughter let her grandmother keep living with a leaking roof when help was standing right there? He walked closer to her, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Because if the roof gets fixed, Cruz said, you lose the photo op. If the problem is solved, you lose the grievance. You needed her to suffer. You needed the mold. You needed the water damage. Because without the suffering, you don't have a tweet. You exploited your own grandmother, Cruz declared. You used her pain to build your brand. A woman stood up in the middle of the room. She was older, with the proud, weathered face of someone who had survived storms of her own. She was holding a Puerto Rican flag folded in her hands. I am from Puerto Rico, the woman said. Her voice was steady, fierce. My family lost everything in Maria. Everything. We waited for help. We prayed for help. I saw your post, she said to AOC. I thought, finally, she is one of us. She sees us. I defended you. I told my neighbors, look, she is fighting for her abuela. She will fight for us. The woman took a step forward, her eyes locking onto AOC. You didn't fight for us, she said. You used us. You raised $100,000 on our pain, the woman said. And we never saw a dime. My neighborhood is still broken. My mother's roof is still leaking. But you got famous. You are a venda patria, the woman spat the word. Sell out. You sold your family for likes. AOC looked down at her hands. She was trembling. This wasn't a Twitter troll she could block. This was a grandmother, standing 10 feet away, stripping away the moral high ground she had claimed for her entire career. You could have written a check, Cruz piled on. You make $174,000 a year. You drive a Tesla. You could have fixed that roof with 1 month's salary. You didn't need a fundraiser. You needed a conscience. But you didn't do it, Cruz said. You posted a picture instead. That is round 4, Cruz said, turning away from her as if he couldn't bear to look anymore. The grandmother fraud. We have 1 round left, Cruz announced, walking back to his chair. And this one is the end game. We have seen how she treats her money. We have seen how she treats her jobs. We have seen how she treats her family. Now, Cruz said, holding up a thick, heavy document, we are going to see what she wants to do to you. Round 5. The Green New Deal. The final round felt different. The anger in the room had calcified into a deep, resolute skepticism. Ted Cruz held the document in his hand, the Green New Deal resolution, like it was an indictment. It was thick, heavy, and filled with promises that sounded like threats to the people in the folding chairs. Round 5, Cruz announced, the ultimate hypocrisy, the Green New Deal. This is her signature legislation, Cruz said, pacing the stage. This is the plan that she says will save the world. And what does it require? It requires sacrifice. It requires you to give up your car, Cruz listed. It requires you to give up your gas stove. It requires you to eat less meat. It requires you to pay higher taxes for energy. It requires you to change every aspect of your life to lower your carbon footprint. Cruz paused. He looked at AOC, who was trying to compose herself, trying to find the defiant posture she usually wore like armor. Sacrifice is a noble thing, Cruz said. During the war, people sacrificed. Leaders sacrificed. But here is the rule of leadership, Congresswoman. You never ask your troops to do something you aren't willing to do yourself. Cruz dropped the document on his chair and walked to the screen. Let's look at your sacrifice. The screen changed. It was a montage. First, a flight log. Washington to New York, Cruz read. New York to Washington. Constant flights, private aviation, campaign jets. The train takes 3 hours, Cruz noted. The Acela is electric. It is low carbon. It is comfortable. But you fly. Why? Because it is faster. Because it is easier. Because your time is too valuable to sit on a train with the commoners. Next image. An Uber receipt log. Uber, 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 Cruz read. SUVs, black cars, not the subway, not the bus, private cars. You want to ban the internal combustion engine, Cruz said, but you don't walk, do you? Next image. A dinner receipt from a steakhouse in D.C. Beef, Cruz said. You tell these people that factory farming is destroying the planet. You tell them to eat lentils. You tell them meat is a luxury the planet can't afford. But you, Cruz pointed to the screen, you eat the steak. You enjoy the meal. The rules are for them, Cruz said, pointing to the audience. Not for you. A man stood up in the back. He was wearing a uniform, gray shirt, name tag. He looked like a guy who fixed things for a living. I am a plumber, the man said. His voice was tired. I own my own van. It's a Ford, gas engine. It holds my tools. It gets me to the job. I looked at your Green New Deal, the plumber said. You want to ban my van. You want me to buy electric. I looked at the electric vans, he said. They cost $65,000. They don't have the range I need. I can't charge it on the street in Queens. I don't have a garage. He looked at AOC. If I have to buy that van, I go out of business, the man said. My 3 employees lose their jobs. My kids don't go to college. And I see you, the plumber said, pointing a calloused finger at her. I see you in the back of that black SUV. I see you flying on those planes. You are asking me to destroy my livelihood, the man said, and you aren't giving up a single thing. Why should I sacrifice my family for your vanity? The question hung in the air. We need structural change, AOC stammered, falling back on buzzwords. It isn't about individual choices. It is about systemic. It is about leadership, Cruz roared, cutting her off. You are telling him to go bankrupt, Cruz shouted. You are telling the grandmother in the back she can't visit her grandkids because gas is too expensive. You are telling the families they can't afford heat. And you sacrifice nothing? You live in the AC. You fly on the jets. You eat the steak. You wear the dress. Socialism for thee, Cruz said, his voice dropping to a final devastating whisper. Capitalism for me. Your life stays perfect. Their lives get harder. That is the Green New Deal. That is the pattern, Cruz said, looking at the audience. We have seen 5 rounds. The Met Gala. She parties, you pay. The lifestyle. She gets rich, you get lectured. Amazon. She gets famous, you lose jobs. The grandmother. She gets content, family gets nothing. The climate. You sacrifice, she flies. 5 rounds, Cruz said. 1 conclusion. He turned to face her one last time. She looked small in the chair. The TikTok queen was gone. The voice of a generation was gone. All that was left was a politician who had been caught. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Cruz said, you are a fraud. The socialist socialite, the champagne socialist, the congresswoman from Instagram. Class dismissed. The room erupted. It wasn't cheers. It was the sound of a district waking up. The applause that followed the class dismissed line wasn't the polite golf clap of a Washington gala. It was the roar of a dam breaking. The tension that had filled the Bronx gymnasium for an hour. The cognitive dissonance between the working-class champion narrative and the reality of the receipts had finally snapped. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat in her chair, visibly shrunken. The camera, usually her best friend, was now an unblinking witness to her dismantling. She looked at her phone, perhaps out of habit, perhaps looking for an escape hatch. But there was no exit strategy for the truth. Ted Cruz didn't step back. He waited for the noise to subside, his hand resting on the podium, watching the crowd with the focus of a man who knows the closing argument is the most dangerous part of the trial. He knew that destroying one politician wasn't enough. He had to expose the entire ecosystem that created her. "Settle down," Cruz said, raising a hand. "Settle down. We aren't done." The room quieted, but the energy remained kinetic. "We have spent the last hour looking at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez," Cruz said, his voice dropping to a conversational, almost intimate tone. "We have looked at the dress, the car, the jobs, the grandmother, the private jets." He walked to the edge of the stage, removing the barrier between him and the people. "But here is the scary part," Cruz said. "She isn't unique. She isn't one bad apple," he continued. "She isn't an aberration. She isn't an accident. She is the rule. She is the prototype." Cruz gestured to the screen, which now displayed a collage of faces. The Squad, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, the icons of the modern progressive movement. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez represents exactly what the progressive movement has become, Cruz declared. Performance activism, Instagram socialism, champagne revolutionaries. It is a movement defined by one simple principle: rules for thee, but not for me. He pointed to the face of Bernie Sanders on the screen. "Look at Bernie," Cruz said, "the original socialist, the man who spent 40 years lecturing you about greed. He owns 3 houses. He is a millionaire. He made a fortune selling a book about how evil millionaires are. He lectures you from his lake house about how you need to pay more taxes," Cruz said, "while he uses every deduction in the book. Socialism for you, capitalism for him. He is the template. He taught them that you can get rich by complaining about the rich." He pointed to Elizabeth Warren. "The fake Native American," Cruz said, the crowd chuckling darkly. "She made millions as a law professor, defending big corporations against victims. She lives in a mansion in Cambridge. She lectures you about wealth inequality while sitting on a pile of wealth she built by working the system. Her wealth is good because she uses it for good causes," Cruz mocked. "Your modest success, your small business, that is bad. That is greed. That is the logic of the faculty lounge." Then he turned to the squad. Ilhan Omar, Cruz listed. She shouts, "Defund the police" from the rooftops. She wants to take the cops out of your neighborhood. But guess what? She spent millions of dollars in campaign funds on private security for herself. Police for you? No. Private guards for her? Yes. Safety is a luxury good for them, Cruz said. They buy it. You have to live in the danger they create. Rashida Tlaib, Cruz continued, she wants to abolish federal prisons. She wants to empty the jails. Easy to say when you live in a gated community. Easy to preach compassion for criminals when you are insulated by wealth and privilege. Cori Bush, Cruz added, another defund the police activist. She hired private security costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. When asked about the hypocrisy, she said, I need security because my life matters. Cruz let that quote hang in the air. My life matters, Cruz repeated. And yours? Apparently, yours doesn't matter enough to have a police officer on the corner. This is the pattern, Cruz said, turning back to AOC. This is how they all operate. They campaign as socialists. They live as capitalists. They preach equality. They practice privilege. They demand sacrifice. They make none. They attack the rich, Cruz said, because they are the rich. They are the new aristocracy. They don't have titles like Duke or Earl. They have titles like representative and activist. But the mindset is the same. We rule. You obey. We fly. You walk. We eat steak. You eat bugs. AOC looked up, her eyes flashing with a moment of defiance. We are fighting for a livable planet. We are fighting for racial justice. You are just protecting the status quo. You are the status quo, Cruz roared back, shutting her down instantly. You are the establishment, Alexandria, Cruz shouted. You are the media darling. You are the celebrity. You are the one on the cover of Vanity Fair. You are the one at the Met Gala. You aren't the resistance. You are the regime. You claim to fight for the poor, Cruz said, lowering his voice to a deadly whisper. But you fight for yourself. The Amazon deal proved it. The grandmother proved it. The Tesla proved it. You are a fraud, Cruz said. And tonight, the whole world sees it. Not just you, all of you. The whole movement is a lie wrapped in a hashtag. That is round 7, Cruz said to the camera. The systemic rot. But the question remains, Cruz said, looking at the audience. How do they get away with it? Why do you keep electing people who hate you? Round 8, Cruz announced. The protection racket. We are going to talk about why the media protects them, why the system protects them, and why they think you are too stupid to notice. The gymnasium was no longer just a venue for a debate. It felt like a town hall meeting in the moments before a revolution. The audience wasn't just listening to Ted Cruz. They were participating in a collective awakening. The systemic rot had been exposed, but now Cruz needed to explain the machinery that kept it alive. Round 8, Cruz announced, pacing the length of the stage like a panther. The protection racket. You ask yourself, Cruz began, looking at a young mother in the front row. How does this happen? How does a congresswoman kill 25,000 jobs and get re-elected? How does she raise money for her grandmother, keep it, and nobody asks questions? How does she drive a Tesla while the subway crumbles and the news calls her a hero? The answer is simple, Cruz said. They are protected. He pointed to the bank of cameras at the back of the room. The media, Cruz said. The journalists, the pundits, they are complicit. They aren't reporters anymore. They are publicists with press passes. When a conservative has a scandal, Cruz explained. What happens? They investigate. They dig. They hound. They camp out on your lawn. They demand resignations. They don't let it go until you are destroyed. But when a progressive has a scandal, Cruz scoffed. Silence. Look at the Met Gala, Cruz said. If a Republican wore a $30,000 dress to a party for billionaires while their district starved, it would be front-page news for a month. The New York Times would run editorials about GOP elitism. CNN would have a countdown clock. But for her, Cruz pointed at AOC. They called it bold. They called it fashion diplomacy. They wrote articles about the designer. They covered for her, Cruz declared. They saw the hypocrisy. They smelled the champagne. But they didn't report it. Why? Because she is on their team. Because she says the right things at the cocktail parties. They protect their own, Cruz said. It is a class solidarity. The media elites and the political elites, they go to the same parties. They live in the same neighborhoods. They send their kids to the same private schools. They look out for each other. And they look down on you. AOC shook her head, trying to regain her footing. The media has been incredibly critical of me. Fox News attacks me every single day. I am the most scrutinized woman in America. Scrutinized? Cruz laughed. You are celebrated. Fox News criticizes you because you give them material, Cruz said. But the rest of them? Vogue put you on the cover. Time made you Person of the Year. Netflix gave you a documentary. They built the statue. Tonight, we are just pulling it down. Cruz turned back to the audience. And it isn't just the media, he said. It is the system of the safe district. She represents a district so overwhelmingly Democratic that she thinks she can't lose, Cruz explained. She thinks the general election doesn't matter. She thinks you don't matter. She thinks as long as she keeps the activists in Brooklyn happy, she can ignore the grandmothers in the Bronx. That is why she kills jobs, Cruz said, because she doesn't need your vote. She needs the donation from the tech worker in California who loves her tweets. She needs the applause from the college student in Oregon who loves her vibe. She isn't representing the Bronx, Cruz said. She is representing the Internet. Social media has broken politics, Cruz declared. AOC is what you get when Instagram becomes Congress, when TikTok becomes policy, when Twitter becomes governance. Performance matters more than substance, Cruz said. Image matters more than results. Viral moments matter more than real help. She posts a photo of herself crying at a fence, Cruz reminded them, referencing a famous photo op at the border. It goes viral, millions of likes. But did she pass a bill to fix the border? No. Did she visit the patrol agents? No. She got the photo. She got the content. And she went home. This is dangerous, Cruz warned. This is corrupting. This is destroying actual representation. If you elect influencers, don't be surprised when you get content instead of legislation. But tonight, Cruz said, his voice rising, tonight proves that the spell can be broken. Truth defeats performance, Cruz stated. Facts defeat images. Reality defeats Instagram. It takes time, he admitted. It takes exposure. It takes courage to speak the truth when the mob comes for you. But truth wins. Tonight proved it. 5 rounds of truth. 5 rounds of facts. 5 rounds of receipts. She had no defense, Cruz said, gesturing to the silent, defeated figure of AOC. She couldn't spin it. She couldn't perform her way out of it. The truth pinned her down. The truth exposed her. The protection racket failed tonight, Cruz said, because we bypassed the media. We came straight to the Bronx. We came straight to you. And you saw it with your own eyes. That is round 8, Cruz concluded. The system is rigged to protect the fraud. But the fraud only works if you let it. We have 2 rounds left, Cruz said, and these are the most important. We have exposed the problem. Now, we have to talk about the solution. Round 9, Cruz announced. The action plan. Because getting angry isn't enough. You have to get even. The gymnasium was vibrating. The anger that had simmered through the first 8 rounds had been transmuted into something more potent. Resolve. Ted Cruz stood at the edge of the stage, no longer the prosecutor dismantling a witness, but a general rallying the troops. He looked at the faces in the crowd, the grandmother from Puerto Rico, the electrician who lost the Amazon job, the teacher whose donation went to a boyfriend, and he saw that the despair had lifted. In its place was a hunger for action. We have exposed the fraud, Cruz said, his voice ringing with authority. We have seen the receipts. We have proven the hypocrisy. But knowing the truth isn't enough. Anger isn't a strategy. Outrage isn't a solution. He walked back to the center, planting his feet firmly. The question is, what are you going to do about it? How do we fix this? Cruz asked. How do we prevent more AOCs? How do we stop the assembly line of Instagram activists who use your pain for their gain? The answer is simple, Cruz declared. Vote them out. All of them, he said, sweeping his arm across the imaginary aisle. Primary them. Challenge them. Replace them. He pointed to the back of the room where the local political operatives usually stood. They will tell you it is impossible, Cruz said. They will tell you this is a safe district. They will tell you that a Democrat always wins the Bronx. They will tell you that the party machine is too strong. The machine only works if you oil it, Cruz shouted. The machine only works if you stay home. The machine only works if you believe their lie that you have no other choice. Don't let safe districts protect fraud, Cruz urged. Don't let the media protect hypocrites. Don't let the party protect liars. He turned to the young man who couldn't afford a car. You deserve a representative who takes the subway with you, not one who drives a Tesla past you, Cruz said. You deserve a representative who knows the price of milk, not the price of a Met Gala ticket. Hold everyone accountable, Cruz demanded. Demand actual sacrifice from those who preach it. Demand actual equality from those who claim it. Demand actual representation from those who promise it. Support honest candidates, Cruz said. Not performative candidates. Not Instagram candidates. Not TikTok candidates. Look for character over credentials, he advised. Look for authenticity over image. Look for substance over performance. Look for the person who has actually lived the struggle, not the person who cosplays it for a magazine cover. Cruz walked to the edge of the stage again, holding up his phone. And here is your weapon, he said. This right here. They use social media for performance, Cruz said. You use it for exposure. They use Instagram for image. You use it for truth. They use TikTok for fraud. You use it for facts. Share the receipts, Cruz commanded. Share the photos. Share the votes. Share the silence when you ask them a tough question. Make them viral for the wrong reasons. Make them famous for their failures. They're tools, Cruz said, tapping the phone screen. Our truth. Demand accountability from everyone, he continued. Not just progressives. Everyone. Republicans, Democrats, independents. If a politician tells you to sacrifice while they live in luxury, fire them. If a politician destroys your job to build their brand, fire them. If a politician uses your family's tragedy to raise money for themselves, fire them. The future doesn't have to be more AOCs, Cruz said, his voice rising with hope. It doesn't have to be more performance activists. It doesn't have to be more champagne socialists. It can be actual representatives, he said. It can be honest leaders. It can be people who practice what they preach. But only if you demand it, Cruz warned. Only if you enforce it. Only if you stop accepting the fraud. He looked at AOC, who was staring at the floor, defeated. She thought she was untouchable because she had followers, Cruz said. She forgot that followers aren't voters, and she forgot that likes aren't loyalty. Tonight was the beginning, Cruz declared. 1 debate, 9 rounds, 1 fraud exposed. But it is just the beginning. The movement is starting. The truth is spreading. And once you see the man behind the curtain, you can never go back to believing in the wizard. That is round 9, Cruz said. The solution. The power is in your hands. Use it. And now, Cruz said, for the final word, the verdict. The town hall ended not with a bang, but with a clarity that was terrifying for the political establishment. The cameras were still rolling, but the show was over. What remained was the cold, hard reality of a career in ruins. Ted Cruz stood center stage, flanked by the screen displaying the evidence of the evening. The dress, the car, the headlines, the broken roof. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat in her chair, a solitary figure in a room that had turned against her. Her silence was the loudest sound in the Bronx. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is finished, Cruz said, his voice final. Her career may continue for a while. Her seat may be safe on paper. But her credibility? Destroyed. Her image? Shattered. Her fraud? Exposed. Cruz looked directly into the camera lens, addressing the millions watching at home. She is the socialist socialite, Cruz branded her. The champagne socialist. The congresswoman from Instagram. Everyone knows it now, Cruz said. Everyone sees it. You can't unsee it. You can't unknow it. You can't believe her again. That is how you defeat fraud, Cruz explained. Not with lies, not with insults, with truth, with facts, with reality. Truth is the ultimate weapon, Cruz declared. Truth is the final victory. Truth defeats everything eventually, including the most famous influencer in Congress. He turned back to the audience in the gym. You saw it happen, Cruz said. You saw the mask fall off. You saw the emptiness underneath. If this opened your eyes, Cruz said, if this exposed the socialist socialite for who she really is, then you have a job to do. Subscribe right now. Hit that button, Cruz urged, because she isn't alone. She isn't unique. Washington is full of champagne socialists, full of Instagram activists, full of frauds preaching sacrifice while making none. And we are going to expose them all. Share this everywhere, Cruz commanded. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, her favorite platform. Email it, text it, send it to everyone you know who voted for her. Send it to everyone who donated to her. Send it to everyone who is struggling while she lives in luxury. Make this viral, Cruz said. Make this massive. Make sure everyone sees who she really is. He pointed to the screen one last time. Drop a comment right now, Cruz said. Tell us which hypocrisy made you the angriest. Was it the Met Gala while you suffered? Was it the luxury lifestyle while you struggled? Was it the jobs she killed that your kids needed? Was it the grandmother she exploited for fundraising? Was it the climate sacrifice she demands while making none? Tell us, Cruz said. Tell America. Tell her. Make your voice heard. And tell us who is next, Cruz challenged. Who should be exposed next? Bernie Sanders with his 3 houses, Elizabeth Warren with her millions, Ilhan Omar with her private security, Cori Bush with her armed guards, all of them living like capitalists while preaching socialism, Cruz said. All of them demanding sacrifice while making none. All of them rich while attacking the rich. All of them frauds. Vote in the comments, Cruz said. Tell us who is next. This is just the beginning, Cruz promised. One debate, one fraud, one exposure. But the movement is starting. The momentum is building. The truth is spreading. You can't stop it. You can't slow it. You can't hide from it. Progressive fraud is over, Cruz declared. Performance activism is finished. Instagram socialism is exposed. The champagne socialists are done, because the truth always wins eventually. And the truth, Cruz said, smiling for the first time that night, is winning now. Subscribe so you don't miss what is coming. Share so others see what happened. Comment so America knows you are awake. You are aware. You are done accepting fraud. You are ready for truth. You are ready for real representation. You are ready for honest leaders. Cruz walked over to AOC. He didn't shake her hand. He simply nodded, a gesture of dismissal. The socialist socialite is exposed, Cruz said. The champagne socialist is revealed. The congresswoman from Instagram is unmasked. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Cruz said to the room, is finished. Truth defeated her. Truth will defeat them all. Let's go. The screen faded to black as the chant began to rise from the floor of the gymnasium. A chant that would follow her for the rest of her career. A chant born from the reality of the receipts. Reality wins! Reality wins! And in the darkness of the closing credits, the era of the influencer politician came to a sudden, violent end.